got the most feedback we've ever had on our Facebook page from this event. And I mean from people all over the world. So thanks to you who came from a distance. I know some of you came a ways to be here today with us. We're not waiting anymore. We're bringing up Ken O'Keefe. Please welcome to the house.
I've managed through my own process to recapture the ability to think for myself. And that's like the first thing they strip from us, by the way. I mean, literally, that's like they strip that right away. And they basically get us to regurgitate a bunch of trivial pursuit questions on command. And if you do that really well enough, then you get to go to university, and then you get to regurgitate slightly more complex trivial pursuit questions. And if you do that on command well enough, and you jump through this hoop and do that backflip and so on and so forth, then you get the job, you make the money, and then you live the so-called American dream. And the way I see it is it's pretty much all programming. I mean, there are some amazing independent thinkers out there who are in positions of, high academia and even in politics to some degree. But for the most part, what we do is we play the game and we get rewarded for playing the game. And I could have easily been one of those guys who did that. I was in the Marine Corps, but something happened to me that traumatized me, quite frankly. And all of the programming just, bam, was just shattered in one fell swoop. I grew up in Southern California. We grow up believing that we're the greatest nation in the world, and the idea that we aren't the greatest, quote, greatest, is like really, really foreign to us. The idea that there might be even more freedom elsewhere, or that there might be more democracy elsewhere, or there might be more virtue or integrity or honor or courage or anything like that is like foreign to us. We believe that we are like the epitome of all of these virtuous things, and no nation can even come close. And it wasn't that long ago for a guy like me to say the kinds of things I'm saying now. It was totally outrageous, completely outrageous. It's turned a lot, especially, America bashing has become quite popular. So the market has changed, and, the things that I'm saying, they have an audience. Very few of us actually have the ability to think for ourselves. And there's different ways to get that back if you've been stripped of it. And I don't care what anybody says, there's a lot of programming in most of us, and very few of us have the ability to actually shed that stuff and start really thinking for ourselves. But when you do, boy, oh boy, does it revolutionize the way you see the world. And, it's a normal process for most of us when we start actually seeing things as they are to feel very alone, very isolated. Many people get depressed, they look at the masses who, are you kidding me? Do people actually believe this nonsense? And it all seems very depressing, but I don't know. I managed to stumble on some things that really helped me along the way. And one of them was the understanding that we are all of us, not just human beings, but all life. We are all brothers and sisters in a family of life. We all have a common fate. We live on planet Earth. What's good for the earth is good for us. What's bad for the earth is bad for us. There's just no way to break that. I mean, you may profit financially from doing something bad for the earth, but have you really gained? Well, the only way that you could possibly have gained is if you believe that you live detached, disconnected from the rest, and that somehow you can derive benefit at someone else's expense. When you understand the truth, from my perspective, understanding that we are all connected, what is good for you is good for me. And there's no way around that. I don't care how clever you are. In truth, your cleverness is your stupidity. You think that you can manage to obtain some real benefit off of exploiting somebody else's weakness. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And I don't care how smart you are, the fact is that if you have harmed others for your own perceived personal benefit, you have screwed yourself. And you have not helped the planet or the greater good. All I really want is to be a free man. I wish no harm, no foul to anybody. I won't harm or foul anybody. Unless, of course, they want to threaten me, and then I'll do whatever I need to protect my own interests. But aside from that, I honestly want what's best for everybody. And, I say that, and I suppose that's probably the good segue into some of the more controversial things, the things that we're not supposed to be able to talk about. which to me is a big red flag to say that's what you're supposed to talk about, these things that we're not allowed to talk about. You know, I don't know the quote word for word, but I'm sure many of you know it. Voltaire, you know, you want to know where the power is, find out who you can't criticize. Well, if there's one group on this planet that you really can't criticize, it's pretty damn obvious. I'm sure everybody's just waiting for that word to come out. You know, but before I even say the word and start getting into this subject, I'm going to repeat again, and I'll repeat as many times as is necessary. Everybody on this planet, including non-humans for that matter, but certainly my human brothers and sisters, are in fact brothers and sisters. And I actually want what's best for all of my brothers and sisters. And I see two populations on this planet who are being set up for a major, major fall. Major, major fall. The parallels I see between these two groups could hardly be any more obvious, in my opinion. And that is the Jewish people and the American people. And I'll tell you the two things that I see in common with them. The first thing is that both populations have derived a benefit by their complicity. Both of us, both populations. And a lot of Americans don't like to hear me talk about responsibility, especially if they feel like they're part of the, you know, dissenting voice, and they've gone to the protests and signed the petitions and voted for the anti-war guy and all this sort of stuff. Then they feel like, you know, hey, don't call me responsible, man. I'm not responsible for that, you know, and they don't like that. They don't like, you know, like the idea that they would have anything to do with what's wrong. You know, of course, I can get into taxes and all sorts of things and all the different things that we're doing that is direct complicity. And we are, and myself included. I'm responsible for this mess as well, you know. I mean, I'm doing what I can, but there are things that I do that are contradictory. At least I'm willing to admit the contradictory things that I'm involved in. I try and reduce the contradictions and the hypocrisy as best I can, but the bottom line is the Jewish people and the American people have benefited profoundly from a twisted, perverse, corrupt, fraudulent system which has imparted more value to our currencies effectively and diminished the value of other people's currencies and relegated much of the planet to a state of poverty that most of us couldn't even imagine, while we've been sitting here relatively high on the hog and enjoying the benefits of this perverse, twisted, unjust system. And we both have this in common. The other thing we have in common is we're both supremacists. And this is American exceptionalism, that's supremacism. You believe you're better than everyone else. It's like a disease. We are supremacists. We believe we're better. And so we can excuse ourselves for the mistakes we make by justifying it in the context of we're better. Still, you know, yeah, we make mistakes, but overall we're great. It's supremacism. And when you believe you're better than other people, it allows you to do things which can be completely criminal, and yet you justify it. The Jewish people have been benefiting from this system. We've been benefiting from this system, and we are both being led down a path which is purely self-destructive, and the writing is well on the wall. We are experiencing a rising of the consciousness of humanity that is so profound and so unparalleled that it is scaring the powers that be. And to be honest, they know damn well they're living on borrowed time. But isn't that part of the optimism we should have? Because actually, while we're all doing our own thing, because we all have our causes, don't we, myself included, we all have our causes, and we're all kind of fighting in our own corner, you know, usually operating with pennies. And we're trying to affect good, whatever our subject is, fracking, you know, anti-imperialism, you know, chemtrails, or, you know, the reptilians, or the Jesuits, or the Illuminati, or, you know, the fear porn, all that's out there. We're all like fighting all these different things and ignoring the one thing which we can't talk about, can we? We can't talk about it. We can't use certain words. Language has been manipulated. Political correctness is the order of the day. And people like me are supposed to be vilified because apparently I'm, to put the correct term, anti-Semitic is ridiculous. My ex-wife is Semitic. My children are Semitic. The people who are using this word don't even apparently know what Semitic means. The people that they're saying that I'm against are actually Ashkenazi Jews, to be more correct, not the Sephardic Jews who actually are Semitic and who come from that region. But the people that I'm apparently against aren't even Semitic. They don't come from that region. They don't even speak Hebrew, which is a Semitic language. The Ashkenazi Jews come from another part of the world altogether, the Caspian Basin and Eastern Europe and beyond and whatnot. They speak Yiddish. I mean, that's their language. It's not Hebrew, and they're not Semitic. And I can't be anti-Semitic unless you want to use a perverse definition of the word. What they really mean to say is anti-Jewish, don't they? They mean to say that I'm anti-Jewish. So let's talk about what it is to be Jewish, which of course we're not supposed to talk about. I'm anti-supremacism, big time. If you feel I'm as anti-supremacism with Jewish people as I am with the American people and anybody else who adopts this kind of thinking. If you believe that you're better than everyone else, or your group is better than everyone else, that's already problematic in itself. But when you combine that supremacist ideology with incredible power, now it becomes a real problem, a big problem, one that I believe we should not ignore, one that we have to address. So in the case of America, well, we all know America's might. I mean, unless you're brain dead, we all know how America's browbeat and bullied everyone around the world into submission. We've got our military bases all over the place. And, we have no amicable relations with any other nation. We're just a big bully, a classic bully. No one ever really respected us over the last several decades. They feared us and did what they had to do. And the ones that stood up to us generally were killed or imprisoned. This is the way it is. But within this context, we have a situation in which this supremacist ideology is taking us to the brink of complete self-destruction. And my problem with Judaism is based on my anti-supremacist perspective. If you are a Jew who believes that everyone is a brother and sister, if you find as a Jew it offensive that a nation called Israel happens to be calling itself the Jewish state, and you are speaking out against it in an honest way, because let's get into infiltration and controlled opposition and controlling the narrative. And here we get into where it's not all black and white, it's not as clear as you would think. Because so many within the groups, right here in Berkeley in particular, are completely controlled opposition, and their job is to make sure that the so-called Palestinian Solidarity Movement doesn't offend Jewish sensitivities. And trust me, if you haven't experienced this firsthand, that is the agenda. You can do whatever you want, but you cannot offend Jews. No matter how true it might be. For instance, the Jewish state, it's not the Zionist state, by the way, it's the Jewish state. The Jewish state enjoys massive support within Israel, and still to this day, although the numbers are dwindling in terms of Jewish support, Israel still enjoys significant majority support around the world from the Jewish diaspora. This is not seriously debatable, and I'm not going to question that more and more Jews are genuinely disturbed by what they see, because effectively they have abandoned the idea of Jewish supremacism. Those that are sincere see this Jewish supremacist criminal state with no extraditions around the world that's involved in organ trafficking, blood diamonds, selling nuclear technology to apartheid South Africa, committing an open policy of genocide. And I say genocide by the legal definition of the word, Black's Law Dictionary, to destroy in whole or part a national, ethnic, or religious group. By that definition, the policy of Israel is inherently genocidal. And it's clear in places like Gaza that the intent is to make things so unlivable that people just leave. But God loved the Palestinians, man. They just keep having kids. They refuse to leave, and it appears as if they can endure anything. Their love of their land and their nation is such that they will not bow. They are going to continue. You're going to need to use nukes to wipe them all out, and that's the truth about what we see in the Jewish supremacist state of Israel, which largely adheres to Talmudic Judaism. And boy, oh boy, let's get into some religious texts that are as obscene as you can imagine. And those who don't understand or think that the power structure within Israel is operating largely within Talmudic dictates are naive. You are naive. These influential religious documents are, in fact, the highest order within Judaism amongst those who are in power today. It's not the Old Testament, the Torah. It's not. It's the Talmud. And in the Talmud, you'll find some amazing stuff. And this is the brand of supremacism that the Palestinians have been dealing with, and we haven't been allowed to say the word Jew and not talk about Jewish supremacism. And I'll tell you what, that's why the Palestinians have been sucking on it for decades, because we've bowed and refused to actually say what needs to be said and be honest about what is really happening here. The fact is that we have the same qualities here in America. It's expressed in a slightly different way, but in terms of actual impact around the world, we dwarf what Israel does. I mean, what they do is obscene, but it's dwarfed by us and what we do with our brand of American supremacism. So the scorn that I have for Israel and Jewish supremacism actually takes a backseat to the American supremacism that I was born into and in fact served as a U.S. Marine. I have major problems with the way we've been carrying ourselves. I believe that we as Americans are collectively responsible for the actions of our nation. That is my perspective. And I also believe that the Jewish people collectively are responsible for the actions of the so-called Jewish state. There are so many subjects that we don't have any real dialogue about, and isn't that where we should be discussing things? Isn't it those most uncomfortable areas that we should be looking at? Isn't that really the mark of a genuine critical thinker, someone who really wants to grow as a human being, morally, spiritually? It's the uncomfortable areas that are the most important. And these gatherings oftentimes are just like preaching to the choir. And everybody patting themselves on the back about how, oh boy, aren't you progressive? And wow, isn't he just so liberal and left and righteous and all this kind of stuff? And I just don't understand that, because you know what? I've got 2 little boys as well. And before I was a father, I had a problem with this, but how can we look at ourselves in the mirror and genuinely have any respect for what we see looking back at us if we're handing this world over to our children just in the current state, much less something worse than it is now? We had children just so we can hand it over to them like that? I mean, that's pretty disgraceful, man. And that's the reality. That's the thing that we're actually confronting. But with all of the kind of doom and gloom and all the kind of pessimism that people can adopt, there are so many reasons to be optimistic. I've already mentioned the growth in human consciousness. There's actually one thing. I find like there's so many things that people discuss that fits into the fascinating category. Like there's a big category for fascinating, but not actually that relevant in terms of affecting a better world. So is it the Illuminati or the Jesuits or the reptilians or the Bilderbergs or, whoever? It's all very fascinating, I have to say, very fascinating. The thing is that they're using an instrument, whoever it is, they're using one instrument above all others to actually affect their control. Money. Money. It's that simple. Money makes the world go round. And what we have is a tiny group of individuals who literally control the vast majority of currencies around the world. They effectively own the Bank of International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve Bank, all the major central banks. They own. There's a tiny clique. We don't even know who the shareholders of the private Federal Reserve Bank are, but we do. We do. But we don't officially know. Because if we knew who the shareholders were, we'd know who's profited by the interest that we pay, which is totally unnecessary, on every single dollar that is coming into circulation. A group of private shareholders is getting the money for that. A tiny group of people, who knows, a few board members, is actually earning the interest off the money that we have allowed our treasonous government to authorize to a bunch of traders who print the money. They use money. And they have an infinite supply of money. Think about that seriously. Infinite. Infinite. Endless budget. Imagine having an endless budget. Imagine that. I've worked with pennies trying to change this world and realized, hey man, it's not possible. You've got to have at least some money. And trying to fight somebody who can outspend you 1,000,000,000 to 1 is tough. In fact, it's pretty much damn near impossible. Not quite, but nearly. The money supply is the thing that runs the world. What this tiny group of psychopaths and sociopaths, pedophiles, and otherwise completely corrupt, immoral, lacking in empathy people is they have an infinite supply of money. And with that money, they have bought everything and everyone that can be bought. So when you talk about human nature, what you're talking about is a millennia-long history of those who have no morals. They are oftentimes not very clever, but many times they are extremely clever, but lacking in any kind of empathy. All of this comes from the financial system. All of it. The problem for the Jewish people is that that system is completely dominated, almost totally controlled by Jewish bankers. The beauty of this system is that it is very, very fragile because it relies on this one thing. And without that one thing, it is powerless, impotent. It cannot do a damn thing. And John F. Kennedy had the courage and the balls and integrity to bypass the Federal Reserve Bank, to bypass this financial system, and he was dead within 6 months. And there ain't no coincidence there. Definitely not. We only need to do one thing to turn it all around. One thing. Let's confront that financial system. Let us print our own money. Let us throw out all of these running around as our so-called representatives who have put their hand up under oath and swore to uphold the U.S. Constitution. These traitors should be thrown in prison, literally. And I'm waiting for the so-called American patriots to do your job. Do your job. You swore to uphold the U.S. Constitution, and these traitors are running around carrying out the orders of a foreign entity and using your American sons and daughters as cannon fodder for wars for Israel. And that is what we've been doing. And we've reached a point now where we've got 22 American service members a day minimum committing suicide because we were sent off to fight a war for Israel in which the Israeli leadership had identified target number 1 as Saddam Hussein. It was infinitely better in Iraq under Saddam Hussein than it is post-invasion occupation of American policy. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was there. Look at it now. A cesspool of these that work for us. They work for us. CIA trained, funded, coddled, and protected the whole way through. Always worked for us. And now Iraq, after our control, is a cesspool of these mercenary fake Muslim who work for us. That's Iraq today. And the kind of suffering that is happening in this nation is incalculable. Do you know in Fallujah, the doctors of Fallujah advised the population, the women, not to have babies? You know why? Because the amount of toxic, radioactive, experimental weaponry we used in that area is such that the degree of birth defects is so high that it is actually advised not to have babies. If that isn't a patent crime against humanity, I don't know what is. And I'll tell you what, I'll use the word again, Jewish power is what put us there in the first place. It was the Jewish state of Israel that dictated we take out Saddam Hussein at all costs, just as we're doing in Syria right now because he fits the same bill, another Arab leader who refuses to bow before Jewish power and American imperialism. And anyone who refuses to do that at that level must be punished. And we will destroy your whole country and send in foreign mercenaries who will chop off your heads and commit any atrocity in our name in order to carry out that policy. And that is the reality of what we're experiencing. All of this stuff is a matter of public record. If you don't know Oded Yanan's a strategy for Israel in the 1980s, you need to read it. You need to read it. How many of you know what the Samson option is? Yeah, the Samson option. Let me paraphrase it for you. The Samson option is, and this has been endorsed at the highest levels within the so-called Jewish state, is a policy which not dissimilar from American policy, by the way, because we Americans have an official policy of first strike capability. We reserve the right to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states in a first strike capacity. We've basically threatened the whole world and said, listen, if we feel you're a bit too problematic, we reserve the right to nuke you, even if you're totally defenseless. That is our official policy, literally. Well, the Jewish state has an even better one. If we feel that our existence is threatened, we're going to nuke all of you. We're going to take you all out. That's the Samson option. 200 to 400 nuclear weapons in the so-called Jewish state. Now, very nicely, thanks to the Germans and your fake history and your guilt, you've now given the Israelis Dolphin-class subs, which they've now armed with nukes, which now can patrol the oceans of the world and deliver those nukes to any target. With a nation that is openly committing a policy of genocide, which has also openly threatened to exterminate the world if it feels its existence is threatened. And I see the so-called Jewish state of Israel as I see the apartheid regime in the dying days of its existence. The apartheid regime enjoyed all of the same favor that we find with the modern state of Israel. It was very famously Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan who were calling Nelson Mandela a terrorist and were openly supporting, trading, and providing all the things required for the apartheid state to continue. While, by the way, I repeat, the Jewish state of Israel was selling nuclear technology to the apartheid regime. Apartheid is a very generous word to use for what the Palestinians are dealing with. Even Bishop Desmond Tutu made clear that the brand of apartheid they experienced in South Africa paled in comparison to what the Palestinians are dealing with. And for a much longer time, the Jewish state is only able to operate in the dark. This is why the dialogue has to be controlled. This is why it needs a media, which happens to also be Jewish controlled, very, very disproportionately. We know about Hollywood, which creates the myths which we follow. This is all completely Jewish dominated. There's no question of this. Many of them don't call themselves Zionists, but it is Jewish controlled any way you cut it. And these institutions are required for Israel to remain in the dark and to be able to play itself off as this peace-loving nation that doesn't have a partner in peace. That narrative has been allowed to continue because of this structure of power. And this is exactly why, of course, I'm not allowed to discuss it. We're not allowed to say the word Jew. Find out who you can't criticize, and there you'll find who is in control. The fact that people come to these events to try and disrupt it and tell us that we can't use these words should be a real incentive and motivation to be more committed to speak the truth regardless of the consequence and not censor ourselves. And the truth of the matter is that we have an Israeli state which is in its dying days. So the real question is it going to carry out the Samson option? That's an interesting question. They're going to carry that threat through? You know, if JFK had had his way, Dimona, the nuclear power plant in Israel, would have been inspected way back in the 60s. We've heard a lot about Iranian power plants being inspected because of their ridiculous, mythical nuclear weapons program, which has no credible evidence behind it. But we would have had 200 to 400 less nuclear weapons had it been for JFK. If he had been allowed to live, that plant would have been inspected and it wouldn't have been able to produce nuclear weapons. AIPAC, Jewish power, Mersheimer, Walton Mersheimer. You know, this monstrosity we know as AIPAC with this incredible level of power, actually Kennedy was going to shut that down too, because the precursor to AIPAC was the American Zionist Council. And Kennedy was insisting on having that registered as a foreign agent. I've actually read the dialogue. It's quite fascinating between the Kennedy administration and the Jewish leaders of the time who were arguing that the American Zionist Council cannot be registered as a foreign agent. And basically they used all these lawyer tactics to delay and, you know, technicality and delay. And you know what? They delayed it and delayed it. I think it was over the course of a couple of years. And they finally got to like the last stage where they really like, that's it now. We've played this game for a long time and now you're finally going to have to pay the piper. Kennedy happened to die within that month. He was dead. Kind of coincidental if you ask me. The consequences of the assassination of JFK could hardly be any more stark. He was replaced by this insanely disgusting Slavic traitor, a man named Lyndon Johnson, who was also the one at the top of the pyramid who covered for another atrocity committed by Israel, the attack on the USS Liberty. Here's our best friend and ally in the Middle East attacking an unarmed ship, not far off where the Mavi Marmara was, by the way, where we were attacked, and the Israelis again attacked a defenseless ship and murdered and executed people on a humanitarian aid mission. We were attacked very close to where the USS Liberty was attacked, funny enough. And what was the lesson learned there? Israel can do anything, man. We can attack you in broad daylight. We can have, hundreds of witnesses, crew members who witnessed the whole thing. People will be threatened and silenced, and it doesn't matter. Israel can just say, oh, we're sorry. Oh, we made a mistake. And our treasonous leaders will cover for that to this day. And the lesson is you can do whatever you want. And this is the lesson. There is nothing but impunity in this world. Nothing. Those who are in power can do anything and everything, and they get away with it. Would we like to hear about the Mavi Marmara a bit? Well, I'll just give you a little tidbit, right? This is one of those examples of where I must have some guardian angels or divine intervention, because the things that happened on that ship were truly remarkable. I did a story, a documentary about it actually, and I've looked at the ballistics reports for those that were killed. Of the 9 that were killed, there's actually a 10th man. Another man was in a coma for several years, and he succumbed to those. So there's actually 10 people that were murdered by Israel. 6 of them provably were executed. The ballistics reports make that clear. Point-blank range shots, kill shots, usually to the back of the head. And in the case of one American boy named Furkan Doğan, the kill shot was right here, just underneath the right eye. Point-blank range, tattooing on the skin, proving that it was at point-blank range. Israel did all that and got away with it. But here's a funny little tidbit. There was a point in that experience where I was involved in disarming 2 Israeli commandos. And without getting into the details, one of the disarmings where I actually took a 9mm pistol off of one of these Israeli commandos was filmed by a press TV reporter. He actually filmed it. And he only told me about it later. And of course, he did everything he could to get that footage out. The Israelis have that footage. They took that footage. So they have footage of me disarming one of their commandos, which probably doesn't win me any favor. I was already not very favorable in the first place, but rest assured, they don't like that at all. And I ended up spending a couple more days, got beat up again, nothing really, nothing to bitch about. It's nothing compared to what the Palestinians endure, so let's put it in perspective. And then they let me go. I was like the last guy to leave, if I'm not mistaken, who wasn't seriously injured. The only ones that were left were in hospital, and they couldn't actually transport them at that point. So I was like the last guy, or certainly one of the very last ones, to be deported to Turkey, Istanbul. 2 days after I got there, a friend of mine, Quiva Butterly, she was on the phone with somebody, and they were saying, what? And she was like, what? And she handed me the phone, and it was Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera's like, what is your response to the accusation of the Israelis? I said, well, what's the accusation? They say, well, you're a, quote, operative of the Hamas terrorist organization. You were traveling to Gaza to, quote, form and train a commando unit for Hamas. So you just had me for a week. I was refusing to leave. And 2 days after, you let me go, oh, he's a terrorist for Hamas. And they released this ridiculous information. And you know who takes it seriously? Because I've traveled the world. You know which nations take this seriously? Well, we're sitting in one right here. It's unacceptable. So I'm honored to be labeled a terrorist by Israel. And I mean that in all sincerity. And I'm honored to be labeled an anti-Semite by the Anti-Defamation League, an organization set up to defame people. Orwellianly perfect is that. The Anti-Defamation League. The whole point of the ADL is to defame people with the brush of anti-Semitism. That's the whole point of it. So I'm honored, quite frankly. Thank you very, very much. I will accept that as a badge of honor. So getting into the good news, yeah? Are we ready for some good news, I think? Hopefully. My concern has been a better world. For real. For real. And I've thought for years and years, what can be done? What can be done to seriously affect a better world? I mean, really, honestly, meditated on it, thought about it, and really tried to figure out what is the best thing that I can do as an individual to contribute to the creation of a better world, something that is sane, something that I can feel good about handing to my children and to everyone else's children. And years of reflection, one thing that I came up with very early was, these tattoos on my hands, world citizen. I realized at a certain point, I looked at what it is to be a citizen, and I realized that a citizen has been entered into a social contract. We're in a contract with the state. And under that contract of citizenship, we have so-called rights, at least in theory we have some rights, and we have obligations. Among the obligations is following these laws, which apparently includes those treasonous laws that are completely contrary to the U.S. Constitution, but apparently we have to follow that. That's a part of the obligations. We have to pay taxes. Technically, we're not supposed to have to pay taxes according to the U.S. Constitution, but you'll probably go bankrupt trying to defend yourself exercising that right. We have obligations. And I realized I don't agree to the contract. That's why I renounced my citizenship. And I realized, most people aren't going to do that. I mean, it's a pretty serious move, and it wasn't lost on me how serious it was. But I felt like I needed to do it. Probably a lot of that was due to being an idiot Marine who signed up to be a strong-arm tool for imperialism. I didn't know that at the time. Only later did I realize that I was nothing but a pawn in a nefarious game. Yeah, Smedley Butler, War is a Racket, incredible book. There's a real Marine for you. And I realized, you know what? I'm not really American as much as I'm a human being. And I don't really come from this thing, these lines that are drawn in North America, otherwise known as the United States, as much as I come from planet Earth. And actually, every human being on this planet is a brother or sister. And I don't give my allegiance to any individual group, religion, nationality. In fact, every single human being, in my opinion, deserves my respect, and I shall treat every other human being as I myself would wish to be treated. It's sanity, it's basic, and everyone can understand it. And that's what I mean. That's what I mean by world citizen. So, affecting a better world. A lot of times when you talk about, what do we need? What do we need? A lot of times what you'll hear people say is, we need to unite. We need to unite. Well, it's easy to say that, but how many things can we actually unite under? I mean, you name me a topic. Name it. I don't care what it is. If you're rescuing orphans from pedophilia, you're going to have a debate about why that's not the correct thing to do. I don't care what your issue is. It's polarized, purposely so. We are being manipulated and engineered to have differences on every level so that we can't unite. This was one of the major problems with the so-called Occupy movement, is that you had the so-called 99% who were putting forward ideas that were not in any way agreeable to the 99%. Not at all. I mean, really, and a lot of really kind of out there lefty ideals and principles, no matter how virtuous or unknown they really are, if you want to unite people, then you cannot be putting forward something which is highly divisive and polarizing. That's not going to unite people. So at the core of the plan that I've developed, which years ago I could have announced this plan. I had the opportunity to do so, but I honestly felt that the timing wasn't right. One of the things I've learned over the years is that no matter how good your idea is, no matter how much it has to offer, if the timing ain't right, it doesn't matter. You're not going to achieve it. Timing is everything, as they say. And it was only in December of last year that I felt the time is now. The time is now. And the reason why I came to that conclusion is because the one thing that I've developed over the years is I've become a really astute observer of humanity, the consciousness, the knowledge, the understanding of humanity. And it was through this observation over many years that I have witnessed a transformation which verifies for me, and I think to those of us who are truly watching, verifies the rising of this consciousness. It has changed drastically. Back in 2001, September 2001, was the height of insanity and sympathy for an imperial nation that had been running roughshod over the world for decades, centuries in many ways, certainly decades. and this incredible sympathy for a nation that was just being set up to carry out these offensive policies, all based on a false flag. Nobody knew what a false flag was then. And as I said earlier, so many people know now that whenever a potential false flag is carried out, there are literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, if not even more, dissecting every last detail of it. I believe we've reached a point where the false flags are actually good in terms of recruiting more people into the category of conscientious. Not to dismiss the hardship, suffering, and pain of those who were taken out as a result of these false flags, because no one can diminish that. And, of course, as a human being, I feel great sorrow for people who lose their loved ones in this. But in terms of the impact, these false flags kill a few Westerners as opposed to, 1 million to 2 million that we murdered in Iraq, never even so much as apologize. So let's get out of our own asses a little bit and start putting things in perspective. If it takes a few Westerners, or even a lot of Westerners, to be slaughtered in order for us to actually start to deal with the reality, good, because we need to do that. We need to do that. We've reached a point now where the false flag, the number one tactic to manipulate people, has been so exposed that it's largely become irrelevant or counterproductive. That's a massive development. Massive, massive, massive. And there's so many other things. In this state, you find the power of unity in, marijuana has been something that, like, the powers that be, they've been totally committed to not allowing this to be used at all, for many different reasons. Hemp as well, incredible part of the solution. Marijuana, amazing plant with so many qualities. But it shows our priorities. We are so committed to this thing that we have a self-interest in. We want to be able to use marijuana, we like it, and therefore we're willing to put a lot of energy into it. And when we put our mind to something, it shows what we can achieve. Despite all of the instruments of power put in place to prevent us from being able to use this plant, this herb, we're now able to use it in a very open way. That's another indication of the kind of power we have once we commit ourselves to something. And that's just that's not even, the overall population. It's just a well-organized minority who really insisted and mobilized and organized and educated. And bam, despite all the instruments of power that would have prevented that, we've achieved it. Well, we can achieve anything we set our minds to. And if you have a product that has the capacity to appeal to people across the spectrum on a planet with 7 billion, well now, you've got some real power there. So, at the core of this plan, this World Citizen Plan, there's a whole lot to it, and yet it's very narrow and very focused. Anyone can understand it. And yet I've not revealed the strategy, and the reason why it's, the basic excuse for me not doing this is it's like, announcing to your opponent in a boxing match what you're going to do. I mean, you don't tell your opponent, I'm going to come in first with a left jab and then a right underhook and another left jab and then a right overhand. You don't do that. You don't tell your enemy, your opponent, what you're going to do. It's just stupid. And I've already experienced, as I spoke about the Human Shield action to Iraq, and I've also was involved in another thing that actually had a lot of power and good for Palestine's Trade Not Aid, Aloha Palestine. Both of them were destroyed by infiltration and subversion. And I had no real money to work with, so I vowed I would not do that again. Now I've got a budget. We did a crowdfunding campaign. I didn't even explain the actual strategy, only some basic principles of it, and we raised over $100,000 in less than 2 months. I only initiated this in December. I decided to do it. We launched crowdfunding within 3 weeks. That was successful within 45 days, and we're now in the implementation phase. And the way this is going to work is the detailed plan is going to be revealed in one of two circumstances. One, I'm killed or I'm imprisoned. I've already made detailed videos about what it is, so if they kill me, well, from the grave, I'm going to be delivering to you what I believe is a viable solution for us to get out of this mess that we're in right now. And I hope that it works, but at the same time, I'm not attached to it because I realize I can only do my best. The other way that it will be delivered is if we do all the work that needs to be done in order for it to be packaged and presented the most compelling way possible with the resources and logistical resources in place to be able to deal with what hopefully will come. And at the core of this plan, I'm not going to get into other details, but believe me, there's other elements. There's a lot of layers of strategy to this plan, again, years and years of developing it because I have this goal of a better world. So at the core of it is an agreement amongst human beings. There's no middlemen. It's a social contract. It's a new social contract. As opposed to the contract that you were entered into at birth, where you were issued a birth certificate, all capital letters, a fictitious corporate entity was created, and you basically, and your straw man were created, and you've been answering for your straw man, and this is all the kind of stuff that nobody's going to take the time to understand. So therefore, I've always recognized that if it's going to require a ton of energy and time to understand, it's not going to appeal. People are already being manipulated and exploited to such a degree that they're not going to make the time to learn the Uniform Commercial Code and legalese. You need something simple, very, very simple. But we have been entered into a contract that is inherently injurious to our rights. The social contract of world citizenship has three things, just three things. And they're completely unobjectionable from any sane perspective. So in a very funny way, in an ironic way, and I love it, I get a chuckle out of this reality, it's completely unoffensive. So let me see if it's offensive to anybody here. Raise your hand if you find any one of these things, three things offensive. The first element of becoming a world citizen is, in this case, I'm a man. You know, you may be a woman, but I'm a man. And I affirm my natural rights. I have the right to live my life with dignity. I have the right to travel. I have the right to freedom of expression. Hell, I've got the right to clean drinking water. I have the right to be a human being without oppressive forces compelling me to be something that I'm not. This is my natural right, and I'm going to affirm that in writing. That's number one. Anybody object to that? The state will, I'll tell you that much. They're going to object to that. Number two, I, as a world citizen, in writing, obligate myself to respect everyone else's natural rights. I don't want it done to me, so I'm not going to do it to you. It's the golden rule. It's the most simple thing ever. If you don't understand this rule, something's wrong with you. This is such a basic thing. And it bypasses the state. So, I affirm my natural rights and I obligate myself to respect for everyone else's natural rights. And the third thing, I come from planet Earth. They call this place the United States now, but you know, after we're gone, it'll be what it is, planet Earth. We come from planet Earth. And what's good for planet Earth is good for us. We should be treating planet Earth like we should be treating our mother, with love and respect. So that's the third. How many people out of 7 billion do you think, if this is delivered properly? And the beauty of this plan is that it's so simple that it will be made into all of the major languages. So this isn't going to be just for a Western audience or an American audience. This is for the world. This is for the people of the world. How many people around the world do you reckon will see the value in entering into a new contract in which we all agree to respect each other and this planet? Now, I don't know what the numbers are. I really don't. But I'll tell you, if it's 1%, that's enough. You know, 1% of 7 billion is enough. We have 7 billion plus of us on this planet. Do you think there might be 10 million who feel that way out of 7 billion? Maybe 100 million. Maybe a billion. Maybe even more. I don't know. But I'm going to do my best to put that forward because I think this is a good agreement. I think we would all benefit from this very sane, very logical approach to life. No longer shall we take the view that we need to give up our freedom in order to enjoy this fake security that we'll never get from this inherently corrupt, violent system. Just three things. Everyone can understand this plan in 15 minutes or less. If I do my job correctly, it won't take you more than 5 minutes. And the question is, do you understand one thing? You're the answer. We are the answer. What we decide to do, we will make a reality. And all that power we gave to the who are running the world, we can take that power right back. We can bypass the state and make an agreement with each other, which is beneficial to every one of us. Unless you happen to be at that top percent and you're benefiting from the destruction of human values, human life, if you profit from war, okay, well, this may not be a thing for you. But thankfully, you are well in the minority because the rest of us are sucking on the situation and we're all struggling to be able to make ends meet. And the same who are running the world have the audacity this is cute, they have the audacity to tell us all, you've all been sitting on your ass too much. You know, you've been living high on the hog. We need to pull on the purse strings. You owe money. Who do we owe the money to? Isn't that a valuable question? Who do we owe this money to? Did we not just bail out the bankers to the tune of trillions a few years back? But we still owe money, do we? And to who? Well, that would be those that you're not supposed to criticize now, isn't it? That's who controls the money system. And they want more of your money. They've got everything. It's not even about the money for them. They want power. They don't want you to have any disposable income or any disposable time to be able to do what you need to do to be a fully fledged human being, to really express yourself, to be free, to feel a certain level of pride and dignity about yourself. Because in this world, in order for you to truly respect yourself, you have to confront in your own way, not my way, but your way. You have to confront the reality. You have to be honest with yourself and be honest with the world and the people you share this planet with. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. But this plan is going to make it about as easy as possible. And the key to its success is not how good I am, but it's how much we want it. And I will do my best to pull a little bit of a Jedi trick to get people to realize we have the power. We can do whatever we set our minds to. We don't have to give our power and allow them to destroy the world right before our eyes, to destroy our children's future. We can make a better world. And we can start with this very simple 3 agreements. The highest social contract of all, as opposed to the social contract that you were entered into at birth as a little baby. You were put into a contract of which you could never possibly have been informed about because you were a baby. You couldn't even understand your native language at that point, but not only were you not informed of it, but you were entered into something that has an effect on you. We can create a contract which has an effect on them, a real effect on them. We can enter into a contract that is as revolutionary as it gets, and yet it's totally unobjectionable. This contract is a spit in the face of power. Every oppressive thing that you're dealing with right now stems from our lack of achieving this very simple 3-step process. Every offense being committed against you, the financial terrorism of the taxman and the IRS, the parking ticket you get, the you deal with in your local community and your local government, the national government, the federal government, all of that is actually a violation of your natural rights. And we can take that back right now. We can say, you know what, I'm not doing that. If the numbers come, and this is where strategy and everything comes into it, if the numbers come, we're going to have a big budget. With that budget, we're going to be paying a considerable amount of money to some honest and good international attorneys who will be defending the position of those world citizens who are best qualified to represent this. People who have made enough money to be deemed taxable, but who are going to stand up, not on their own, with the backing of the millions of world citizens if this is to be successful. And the argument is going to be that I cannot be compelled to pay tax when I can prove beyond any reasonable doubt that a portion of that tax is being used to commit the worst crimes possible against fellow human beings, specifically wars of aggression, which, if you believe the narrative of the Nuremberg principles, was in fact the greatest crime. All of the crimes of war stem from the war of aggression, the initiation of war in an aggressive way. That's why Hitler is, so hated and whatnot, apparently, because he invaded Poland. He had much more claim to Poland than we do for invading Iraq or Afghanistan or any number of places, but apparently this was the greatest crime ever committed, and we're doing it. And we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that our taxes are going to pay for that. So while we may chant slogans and hold up placards that say, not in our name, in our name, paid for by us, this we can say, no more. No more. Morally, I cannot continue supporting this. And lawfully, I've also entered into a contract. And unlike that contract you entered me into at birth, of which I could not be informed and certainly could not provide consent, I am a thinking man or woman. I have, of clear conscience, entered into this contract because I see it as beneficial not only to me, but to humanity as a whole, and also to this planet. So, if you want to claim that your contract that you entered me into at birth, which inherently strips me of my natural rights, is the highest law of the land. Good. Let's confront that reality. Our job, according to the state, is to finance the worst crimes imaginable, and you have no choice. The position of the state is, doesn't matter whether you entered into a lawful contract or not, you don't have the right to refuse to pay for mass murder. We tell you what you can do, and we order you to do it, and if you don't do it, we'll throw you in jail, or we'll kill you, we'll threaten you, we'll do all the things that we can do, because your job is to pay for this that's happening over here. I look forward to finding out how many of us are finally going to say, not doing that anymore. Not anymore. We have the power. So I believe, on that note, there is more to it, and I promise you there'll be bang for the buck when it is really presented in full. But I honestly believe that this year, 2016, boy oh boy, is this a big year. This is a big, big, big year. We have an opportunity to prevent the worst case scenario. And this time is a great honor, really. As tumultuous as it is, wow. What a time to be alive. I firmly believe that this generation, the here and now, we are going to define the future of life on planet Earth, including our children. It's up to us. And if you hold the cynical point of view, please know that the tyrant loves you more than anything else. The tyrant needs you. The tyrant needs you to believe that you cannot change this world, that you're only one person, that it's always been this way, it'll always be that way. They need you to believe that, because if you don't believe that you can have a better world, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. But if you believe and you can see a better world, and I can see it, literally. Right now it's upside down, and it will be flipped right side up, and you will not recognize the world when it's flipped right side up. I'll tell you what, man, wow, is that going to blow your mind? We're actually going to have people in positions of public trust who represent our true will. Honorable people with integrity and wisdom. Imagine that. Imagine having a government with people of honor and integrity and wisdom who truly represent your will. Imagine that. We've just come to accept that that's not possible, haven't we? Isn't it? And that's one of the greatest achievements of all. They've got us to accept it. Unacceptable. In a word, unacceptable. We can change all of that. It's up to us. 2016. Let's make it happen.